Welcome to the Kontent Rocks Podcast, the show about all things Kontent.ai, .net, and Azure for people who want to learn more about headless technology. And now, here's your host, Brian McKeiver.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the latest episode of the Kontent Rocks Podcast. As the intro said, this is Brian McKeiver. I'm your host, and I'm very pleased today to be joined by a couple esteemed colleagues and actually a little bit of a friend. I've known Cruce for some time, but Alaa, we're a little bit newer relationship. So guys, today we're going to be talking about your tool you've created, this RealContent plugin for Figma and connecting content out of your CMS or other content repositories. And very excited to show it off. But before we get into the full aspect of things, Cruce, Alaa, why don't you guys introduce yourselves quickly? Because I think this is the first time you've been on the show.
Yeah, it is. Hi, Brian. Thanks for having us here. I've been also, like yourself, been building digital stuff for a long, long time, and really been very, very taken with this decoupling of content and presentation, front end and back end separation that has really enabled this whole headless move. We've been working with both monolithic implementations as well as hybrid and now headless implementations for some time, and we noticed some missing pieces and parts in that process that has led us to start up some innovation programs around that, and that's where Alaa came in. Alaa joined us as our head of innovation. Alaa?
Yeah, thanks for having us. I am Alweish. I'm heading the Innovation Labs team here. As Cruce has mentioned, we're helping our content strategy and content engineering teams by developing some tools and plugins. And RealContent, the tool we're going to see today, is one of them. So nice to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. And, I think, Cruce, you've been doing this for a couple of years now, right? You've been in and around content and heard all the terms: content operations, content modeling, content strategy. You guys are kind of going off this pioneering term of content intelligence. Do you want to talk about that just quickly as well? Because I'm very interested in why you call it that.
Sure. Yeah. Content intelligence is really the effect that happens when our content is structured and semantically enriched and able to be presented in ways that allow the content to be presented in relationship or response to a customer need, and to receive information back from the customer and then change what we present to the customer based on that data that we're receiving back. And so that back and forth of assembled presentation of component content into these kind of composable experiences, that really is the outcome of a content intelligence program. We see content intelligence as being born out of a number of practices: content engineering, content strategy, and content operations. Content engineering deals with the structure of content itself, how it's organized logically in containers within the application, the API, and the presentation layers. And then also content operations is how all of that ends up working within process and systems and governance and the organization of the people that work with a content supply chain. So work with a lot of enterprises that deal with content transformations where they need to localize it for many languages, or it has to go through regulatory and medical or legal reviews, or it has to be worked through different departments for different enrichment. So there's a process by which things happen, and that's the operations side. And of course, strategy deals with how is our content being used, and is it generating a monetizable value, and how does this portfolio all work together across a lot of customer experiences, usually across a lot of channels. And so we've really spent a good amount of time putting together these kinds of programs for clients. That kind of transformation work is a core of what we do. The implementation work is for us um, is a backdrop against these kind of practices that are helping organizations kind of think kind of comprehensively across departmental organizations about how content gets done.
Right. Fantastic. And all those terms definitely apply to having, a great headless CMS to back it up, like Kontent.ai, which is kind of why we're all here today, because we want to show listeners, and if you're watching, even maybe when early stage of this, when you're working on a prototype on a design with a tool like Figma, and we'll show that in a little bit, but generally, I think that this is a step that most people don't know about, which is why I invited you guys to be on the show to talk about it. And I know you have some slides prepared, so we can kind of dive right into kind of why RealContent exists, maybe, and maybe Alaa, then you can kind of show us all, demo it, talk about how you created it and how people can use it, and then we'll end up with eventually, if you're interested, how people can check it out. But I will add to the stream here the slides that you've got created. And,
Cool.
Cruce, I would say take it away. What do we have?
Okay. Well, yeah, it's something that many of us in digital development have been working toward for a long time, which is integration between design, development, and content in ways that help the end product of the digital property work in a way that is integrated across really not only the disciplines, but also the layers of the stack that are working with the components that we're building. And when everything was monolithic and all the web pages were static, or built on at least fixed templates, then it was a lot easier for things to happen in silos, for there to be sort of like a design process that happens where then things are kind of statically created in a prototype and then handed off. And then development works with whatever comes out of that design process, and content folks kind of get sandwiched in the middle there.
Or worse, content is forgotten and not even thought about to the end of that process back in those old days, right?
Oh yeah, and even today, I mean, there's plenty of new builds where the content is kind of an afterthought still, and so there's really a big problem when you're dealing with component-oriented design that is also really needing to work with content components. If there's no planning around the content, then there's a ton of breaking events, and there's a ton of rework, and there's a ton of like chasing, each kind of handoff point chasing its tail with the person they were supposed to get it from in order to cycle it to something they can use. And so our goal in making this shift towards component content as part of prototyping is to get the teamwork together between design and development. And this mess of a slide is basically just talking about the way it works today. Sadly, there's a whole lot of content modeling that's happening in a totally ad hoc way. I know your team works on modeling ahead of the game, and I know a lot of headless implementation teams that are content centric think about the model before the build. But inside the enterprise and inside a lot of teams, we've seen really that a lot of times it's driven entirely by design. And so what ends up happening is all of those like what gets presented and how it gets laid out is dictating the content model. So basically the content model is happening because somebody put a design in place, and then that's kind of then being replicated in the CMS. But meanwhile, the authors are also having to work on content, and they're creating essentially a logical content model of, okay, well, there's, going to be a headline, and there's going to be an offer title and an offer ID, and I'm going to need to be able to tag it so I can present it. And so they're coming up with stuff as well, sometimes in a spreadsheet. and, or a document like a Word doc, Google Doc. And those are kind of ad hoc models as well. So those models aren't getting reconciled, and the prototype isn't matching the content.
Yep.
And so, yeah, it's sounding familiar.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've been in a project where a designer lays out like a product detail page, right? And there's maybe some feature bullet points underneath a tab. And then we go back to the implementation team, and maybe they're pulling information from a PIM or an ERP, and they go, we don't have that field of information. We don't have that separated. It's just one giant description field. And all of a sudden, it's what you said. It's like there's this other field or element or whatever you want to call it that just has to come from somewhere, and people tend to just kind of either make it up or jam it in or ignore it.
Yeah, ignore it until somebody somewhere notices after it's in CSS that, oh my gosh, we forgot. And then the weird thing that happens with a lot of these things is it breaks after it hits real content.
Yep.
And so if it breaks after it hits real content, that's normal. But if it doesn't get tested with real content until it's already through development, what ends up happening is you end up redoing all the site parts of the cycle, which which delays the project, creates a bunch of added cost, and creates a bunch of sort of team friction that's really not needed. Because if everybody's working against the same components, then we're sort of able to design things like a kitchen team could if they had a set of standard ingredients or whatever. Like there's so everybody can create different recipes with it, but they all know what they're working with, and there's an agreement on how the kitchen sort of functions. And so that's really what we're looking at in this new approach, which is instead of doing all these rework and instead of doing all of this disjointed handoff, instead of having everything be static and then break later and then have to be redone, it's really define that content model ahead of time. We have another tool where we won't be looking at today, but that's called Schema Flow, that basically lets you, if you want, design the content model independently, and then you can import it to Kontent.ai. So that way you can map it out in Figma or FigJam and collaborate on it, and then we have a AI tool that lets you kind of build it out to schema.org attributes and whatnot. And then you can actually import that as a JSON into Kontent.ai. And once the headless CMS is configured, once that actually is got the model, at that point you're through RealContent connecting the content into to Figma, even if the content doesn't exist, or even if it's coming from multiple other sources. The goal is to have it meet inside of a dynamic prototype in Figma that's using real content from the component structure. If the component structure needs to change along the way, no problem. Designers still have the flexibility to do whatever they want in Figma, and they can make things static if they want in Figma, because some designers want it, hey, I just want it to look this way. But they can also have other elements, and Alaa will show this, that are dynamically connected to the headless, so that it can change and be variable, and you can look at the variation, dynamically in the experience with, if you're showing a client or if teams are showing each other, they're working together. And then that way you're creating the content structure and the design at the same time, collaboratively, in a way that allows people to then have an outcome that everybody can depend on and everybody's been a stakeholder in order to kind of make the development a lot smoother. Does that make sense as an approach?
It does. And I think you've pointed out a lot of value there in terms of having everyone be on the same page, from maybe a discovery team, a design team, and actually even into implementation, right? Because you're all working off that same content model. And if changes need to happen, I think the other aspect is you can update in maybe one or two places, and suddenly that new change can go all the way back to the design pretty easily, as well as if you have maybe a portion of the site built or whatever you're building. So I think that, the idea of we're going to work in all of the phases with RealContent is incredibly important to a successful project.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, exactly. Because you can continue to iterate the model. But it's a living process. That way there's attention being paid to the model rather than it being an accident that has to get reconciled later. But you can do it in a way that's visual. It doesn't have to be like, oh, it's that specification that nobody looks at, you know.
Yep.
It's a living thing that's part of Figma, and it's not an abstracted boxes and arrows. It's like the content elements, like either by field name or the content itself. So you're pulling the actual title.
Well, I do have a feeling that the three of us could probably sit here for a good hour or 2 hours just talking about the process and the concepts.
Yeah,
and that'd be fantastic. But I don't know how many people are going to watch the whole thing. So
yeah, let's look at it.
Let's look at it. Let's dive into it. And I'll let me see. Alaa, if you want to take over, share screen, I can throw that up on the feed and talk us through it. I think that'd be a fantastic way to do it.
Yeah, thank you, Brian and Cruce. Let me go ahead and share screen here. All right. Just to confirm, can you see my Figma?
I can.
Perfect. Okay, so today we'll be looking at the default sample project that comes with Kontent.ai, the coffee project, and we'll be building like a website with articles and some coffee products. So we'll start by opening RealContent. You can find RealContent by just searching RealContent under plugins, and you just run the plugin. My project is connected already, so I don't have to connect it again, but it's pretty simple to connect. You just need to copy in the project ID from Kontent.ai so that you give RealContent read-only access to the project. And with that, you can browse the types that are in the Headless in Kontent.ai, and you can see the elements within these types over here. And then you can also see the content sources. So let's assume that you're starting with, a prototype like this, and you want to link this to the Headless, to Kontent.ai. All you need to do is to select the element, the design element, and click this replace button. This replace button will actually link this design element to the content element. It will create a link and it will replace the content. I can do the same for the image over here and the other elements in my design.
So let me just a quick interject right there, and I want to give you guys a round of applause for actually just making that happen so easily. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've had to work with clients and people on the projects to like, can you just get us a real image to put in the designs, and how hard it is, and the fact that you can just pull it in from the Headless CMS and it instantly appears. That alone is pretty darn cool. So I'm excited already.
Yes, absolutely. And yet, if you're starting with something, this, just browsing the content this way, or you can also, to your point, just browse whatever you have there. So you can drag and drop everything, in that type, and see all of the elements, and to get to know, what is the content you will be working with, you will be designing, if the content is already there. And then you can, of course, swap between different sources and browse the content there. So I have actually here linked the other elements in my design. And because these, all of these elements are linked, now I can copy the whole design and, swap the content to another content entity, and see, how my design flexes, and can easily generate different content and stress test my design, fix any issues. One thing to highlight here, go ahead.
That's really cool. I love how, you're using the word stress test a design and seeing multiple iterations. You did that in about, I don't know, 3.5 seconds. And I would challenge other designers to do that manually that fast. Just for maybe a project stakeholder or someone looking to approve designs, seeing it maybe 1, 2, 3 ways for an article landing page like this or an article detail, that's fantastic. That's another very cool thing that you can do with this.
Yeah,
And
we
one
were just looking at it with a client in the grocery business, and they had many complex interfaces with different recipes and offers and promos, all needing to dynamically update, and they need to stress test those designs across platforms. And these are lots and lots of modules, basically components that are all being reused with different content items. In this case, they're able to test very, very quickly and just swap out all of the content that is in an interface across their entire ecosystem of platforms within one Figma canvas, using the plugin very, very quickly, whereas something like that would take a whole day or more for somebody to copy and paste out if they wanted to test even one other item, let alone the whole set of content. So it really does speed things up.
Right. And think about, like, say they do that, say they make 6 or 7 manual copies, and then somebody wants to make a change. Going back and having to do that manually is just so much extra labor for this just basically does it for you.
Yes, and also talking about refreshing the content. If the content is being changed in the headless, we have this refresh button over here. You can refresh the content, the design. It will not automatically refresh, but you can anytime select and refresh, and you can also see the items that are selected, the items that are linked, and you can unlink some items, as Cruce has mentioned, and make it like detached from the content entity there. So refreshing, generating different designs, or testing the designs with different content entities is one of the key values of using RealContent. And I wanted to mention something, highlight on the support. We support rich text fields, like these items are bold in Kontent.ai. So we transform the rich text into like Figma layers here. We support also hierarchies, or let's say referenced contents. For example, the author here is another type, and when you drag and drop the author, it will bring the elements of the nested type as well, so that you can design with the the reference entities as well.
Very cool. So the components basically can be rendered in rich text. You can bring in linked items or modular content, which is a key value of Kontent.ai and why we like to use it so much. And this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but like literally it's nothing special you need to set up in Kontent.ai. It's really the one thing you mentioned is just the project ID. And then
Exactly.
do you support like the preview content as well with the preview API?
Yes, we supported that in the last release last week actually. We support now both production and draft or review content. So if you can work smoothly with both workflows.
Awesome, that's cool. That's very good to hear.
Yeah, and languages as well, which for some teams is a big deal. Where if the team is dealing with how their design is going to look in like, for example, German, where the words get really long or whatever, and so it really changes the design and how everything works. And so you can create a lot of not only stress testing for layout, but stress testing for language as well.
Super important. Yep, I agree.
Yeah, and working with components is also one of the key values of using real content. So if you have a component like this component over here, it's not actually just a card. I can make it a component. I can simply, as we've seen, we just link the elements. So link the title, link the other elements to the model or to the content systems, and then we can make this a component, a design component. And now this design component is dynamic. So I want to have the related article section here, so I can copy and into here and have like instances of this component, and I can easily swap and also the content of these components will be dynamic, and that will save the designer a lot of time, because they don't have to create multiple variables of the same component. They can create one component and then only swap the content.
That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, I almost don't even know what to say about how fast you put together that related article section. I'm sold. I'm totally sold. I'm definitely something that I want my team to maybe possibly start using. Maybe we should talk a little bit about how would someone go about finding it and using it, and is it free? Is there a license model? What are you guys planning for people who want to use it, who are interested?
Yeah, there's a free download, and literally if you're in Figma, you just go to plugins and search RealContent. You can download it right away, try it right away. Free to try, and you can use the demo content that's in there, or you can use the Sheets feature, the Google Sheets. So if you want to use Google Sheets as an ad hoc data source, even let's say you don't even have your license set up for your Headless, you can actually start using dynamic content out of a spreadsheet,
Okay.
and then migrate to the connection. So we only charge once you have a live connection to the CMS, and then it's just a per user license. And we're working out a partner model. So for anybody who's a reseller, that kind of thing, you can talk to us. We'll come up with a way to provide discounted licenses for your team, and then provide a way for you to be able to provide it to your clients as well. So
okay,
yeah.
Awesome. Well, guys, we're a little over, so I'm going to let us all go at this point. But fantastic demo. Thank you, Alaa, for that very much. Cruce, as always, great talking to you. Also, if people do have questions, though, do you want them to just push them to like the website that talks about, or do you want them to email, Twitter? How would they get a hold of you if you want to find out more?
Yeah, well, take a look at the here. I'll show you this slide 17 here up on that one. Yeah, that's got the info@schematica.io is a good way to email us. You can try it out on schematica.io. You can take a look at the overview sort of product sheet up there, or you can just download it on the Figma store, and you can learn more about at simplea.com. So that's all different ways to get in touch, but we'd be happy to hear. You can reach out on LinkedIn as well. Happy to connect and talk about UX and component content, composable design, and all of that stuff. We're really excited about this world. It's evolving all of the time, and it's fun to see design and development coming together. So.
All right, well, gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Everyone, this has been the Kontent Rocks Podcast, and we will talk to you all next time.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.